Hi, y'all. We're so excited to have you here and want to welcome you to Flatiron School's Intro to Software Engineering, or what we call Coding for Beginners. And this is HTML and CSS, how to build a memory game. My name is Corey Mickelson. I'm the Marketing Events Coordinator here at Flatiron School. Big part of my job is hosting free workshops like this evening's event to give you all an opportunity to meet some of our instructors and get more of a feel of what the Flatiron School experience is like. I also host another series called Tech in 20, where we take 20 minutes to discuss hot topics within the tech industry. So it's something real fun you can do on your lunch break. Quick reminder, we're going to be using the chat as our main source of communication tonight. So make sure that little blue button is changed from host and panelist to everybody. That way we can all chat together. Both Sam and I will be monitoring the chat to help you along throughout the workshop. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our host for the evening, Sam Boishen. He is one of our lead software engineer instructors. Take it away, Sam.
Woo! I'm like imagining everyone's clapping. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sam. I'm from the Boogie Down Bronx in NYC. Shout out anyone in the city. My family is from Ghana, West Africa. Shout out anyone from the motherland. We are going to have a blast today. We are going to be working on putting together the Simon game, if anyone remembers that from way back when. Let me screen share real quick. Desktop 2.
Got it.
Awesome, cool. We are going to be building out this Simon game, and which if anyone has any experience with HTML and CSS, we're gonna know it's gonna take a little bit to get this looking something like what it is that we see here. And then this is the importance of the two-partness of the series. So we're gonna focus on getting everything set up for part one, and then start to get a little bit of JavaScript functionality going today, just so that we can get the wheels turning as far as that goes. And then part two is going to be more heavily JavaScript, and that's where we're going to complete out all of the functionality. So again, if anyone is joining, just a reminder that this is the site that I'm going to be coding on. So let me actually bring it to the beginning, replit.com. So this is going to be the site that I'm actually going to be working from. Again, if you are using VS Code or any type of text editor, feel free to do that if you're coding along. If you are doing that, we're going to need an HTML file, a CSS file, and a JavaScript file communicating together. But nonetheless, once we get set up here on this site, regardless of what your environment is, I know I saw some folks in the chat saying we're complete beginners and stuff like that. I get it. And this is why we're doing this, so that anyone, no matter where it is that you're coming from, we can start to make some type of sense as to how it is that you can use JavaScript, HTML, and CSS to make something really fun and cool. So no worries, no pressure, folks. Sam will walk through the process, catching up on the chat. So real quick, kind of always like to start off, get a quick temperature check of how everyone is feeling. I am really passionate about emojis. So you'll start to notice that anytime we take a quick pause, I'll ask, hey, like anyone have any emojis you want to drop into the chat? So drop any emoji that kind of just depicts how it is that you're feeling today, how it is that the week is going for you. See 100%. Keep them coming, folks. See the rocket, folks are. Shauna's probably looking hot over there. I see that. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Cool. Got a nice mixed feel. You know, wherever it is that you're at, folks, it's okay. Let's all inhale, exhale, take a deep breath. We're gonna code, create, and learn together. I love that the website had that in the background. That worked out really well. But no worries, folks. So again, just a reminder, hopefully this gave folks some time to get a little bit situated. As I was over here chatting a little bit. Again, this is the site that we're going to be using. If you are going to be coding along in your own environment as well, then make sure you have an HTML file, JavaScript file, and CSS file all together. So a little bit more about me. I am the lead instructor at the Flatiron School Software Engineering program. So I work with students through JavaScript, React, Ruby, and Ruby on Rails, and then we make our full stack application. But today we're just going to be focusing on JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, which are very much the heart of getting any type of web application going. So if anyone is just joining again, I'm just going to drop the link one more time and then just take y'all through how it is that we're going to get set up today. So if you click start coding on this site, it will take you to a place where you can either create a REPL account completely, or you can continue with Google or continue with GitHub. And if folks have been doing some development and have a GitHub set up, then this will link you immediately to the site, or you can continue with Google if you have Gmail. And if not, then you will just sign up and get that account created. All you need is a username, email, and password, just so that you can follow with Replit or just sit back and watch. Yeah, and I was gonna emphasize that as well. No pressure, and I'll repeat this again on coding along and keeping up with every single portion. Remember, like Corey was saying, this is going to be recorded, so you can loop this back as many times as you need once you get the email link, and then pace yourself through everything. Because again, I'm going to try to get stuff as situated, as streamlined as possible, but I do want y'all to take some time and have some fun and streamline everything and really customize it yourself at your own pace as well. So hopefully that gave folks time to get situated. This is an incognito tab here because I actually am already signed in. Once you are signed in, whether you link your Gmail or your GitHub or anything else like that as well, you just need to hover over this options tab here to get to the home section. And again, feel free to, as this is here in the background as well. But the main thing we're going to do is just look for this plus button here in the upper right-hand corner to create a new repository. And what it is that we're going to do from there is choose HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And when you click that, it's going to situate a code base that's going to have those 3 files already configured and linked together. And here you can just name your project, whatever it is that you want to name it. So I noticed while getting ready for this that Simon has Sam in it. So we can call this Salmon game if we choose to, or you can name it anything it is that you want to. But we're making the Simon game, as you see on the right side of your screen here. So if I do create REPL, it is going to guide us over to a screen that has everything that it is that we'll need. So again, we see that I have like the image here on the side. If we use Replit, does it push to GitHub? If you have your GitHub linked, I think it's still going to mainly be on Replit. I logged in with my Gmail, so but I would say, if anything, you can go to your profile as well and then see if you can get that link to GitHub if you do want it to push to GitHub. Just following up in the chat there. So once you open up the REPL site, and again, REPL stands for Read, Evaluate, Print, Loop. And this is a site that was put together so that folks can just get started development quickly. And not really have to worry too much about environment setup. But if you are working in your own environment, feel free to be following along in that way as well. But this is just a way that you can go to the site and get an HTML, JavaScript, and CSS code base started from complete scratch altogether. And then you can just actually start programming in the files themselves. So here we're looking at an index.html file. Then if I pull this a little bit to the side here, we have our JavaScript file and we have our CSS style sheet as well. So I'm just going to drag each one of these over to the side one by one, just because it's a little bit easier to see all of them that way. So that I can just start making a little bit more visual space on the screen. So we have our index.html file, we have our JavaScript file, and then our CSS file here. So we're going to start with our HTML, and then we're going to move into our CSS, and we're going to kind of be working back and forth between the two. And then we'll wrap up in our JavaScript file for today, and then we'll pick back up with that part 2 next week. So now that I have those 3 files open, what you're going to realize is I'm just going to drag this sidebar over a little bit just so we can get a little bit more visual. We can see as much of our code as possible. What you can also do is if you click this box here, little box with the arrow pointing to the upper right-hand side, it'll actually open this up in another tab so you can actually see what it is that we're developing so far. So as I take us through our HTML and get us situated, we'll start to see how everything's coming together. But so far, this is our site. We just have something that says hello world on a blank page. So with that being open, I'm just gonna move this to a tab on the side here, just so that, again, I can get a little bit more space on the actual page so y'all can see the code a little bit more detailed, but just know that on the right side here, this is what it is that we're actually creating today. So just wanted to get a quick temperature check, folks. How are we doing so far in the chat? Drop an emoji. You can do a thumbs up, check mark. I saw a bunch of people drop the rocket ship emoji as well. We're doing okay so far, folks? Awesome, awesome, awesome. Cool. Doing great, y'all. So we should have a blank HTML file open in the browser, which is obviously linked through the REPL it site, but we just see hello world showing up here. So again, we have 3 files, and anytime you're doing any type of general front-end web development where you're working with this trichotomy, as I call it, with tri being having 3 and HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, they link together in very specific ways. So HTML always acts as like the base of everything. Like this is what you're gonna see by default when the page loads. Our CSS, which stands for cascading style sheets, is how it is that we're going to adjust the aesthetics of everything. So we're going to change colors of stuff. We're going to add a little bit more flair and aesthetics to everything that's happening, so that everything doesn't look like Times New Roman font the entire time. And then our JavaScript is how it is that we're actually going to create some more functionality and some more dynamic actions by listening to events, which is what the concept is called, that we'll wrap up with today. So if I scroll through our HTML, we see that this hello world text is floating here beneath this body tag. So I'll go through like the tags as well, but just kind of want to just highlight to folks, if I change this to a capital W and then maybe put a little smiley face here, and then if I refresh this page on the side here, we'll see that what I just wrote is actually reflecting in the browser here. So just make sure that you're able to do some type of quick change to the text that you saw in the browser before, below your body tag, because then you know that everything else that is that you'll be doing is going to work as well. Sometimes some of the nightmares in development is sometimes things just aren't connected properly, and that's why we can't see what's going on. So we always want to do these quick little checks, like the classic legendary hello world, just to see what it is that's happening. So now that I saw that I was able to actually change this and it reflected in the browser, we know that there's no issues with what it is that's what we're actually working on. So how did he add the programs? So are you asking, Daniel, about the files at the top here? The index.html, style.css, and the JavaScript file? Just making sure I'm keeping up there in the chat. Yeah, so just to recap that a little bit, if folks are just getting caught up to speed, whether you're setting up your account or anything like that as well, or maybe you want to get yourself some tea or some water or anything like that, it's okay, folks. We're moving at a steady pace today. So if you click the files on the side, this little sheet of paper here, it'll open up a little bit of a menu. And all I did was just drag each of these files over into the top of the development space so that I could move this to the side so we can see as much code as possible, just to maximize the screen. So hopefully, awesome. I tried that, but it didn't work for me. That's interesting. Well, what you can also do is leave that sidebar open. I'm just trying to make sure that y'all can see as much of the code as possible. And you can just click these one by one as well. That's okay. So if you click, you should be able to see each one of those files one by one. But I just have them at the top so that we can get a little bit more visual space. Cool. And then when you refresh, you should see that change show up. Awesome. Appreciate that, James. So if folks are having trouble seeing what's in the browser, it's okay. This font is a very fixed small size because we haven't really marked it up yet. We haven't really customized it yet. But this is just something that we need to be able to see just so we know that everything is connected properly and working together. If folks are asking about the actual size of the code, let me know if I can try to, if I do Command Shift plus, is that a little bit better on the size of the code? Good there? If I get some thumbs up in the chat or some sparkles, just to make sure we're good. Cool. Awesome. Looks like folks are helping each other out in the chat as well. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Appreciate seeing the community in the chat because that's how it is that we get through this, folks. We work together. So cool. So hopefully this is giving folks some time to get situated. So now I'm going to start kind of analyzing what's going on in our HTML because that's very important to everything it is that we're going to be doing here. So I'm just going to float over next to this number 11 here and just collapse these two tags. It'll bring it together just so we can see everything a little bit more visually in the same space. So when we're working HTML, which is hypertext markup language, we're pretty much using these special tags to mark up, as it's called, or change or style or give particular properties to the text that is between them. So we see here that this is just setting this up as an HTML doc in of itself. And then the HTML tags usually have an opening and a closing. There are certain tags that are self-closing, it's called. And if we get to that point where we are using a self-closing tag, I'll loop back to it and then show y'all what it is that is making that self-closing. But what I'm gonna do is just highlight from lines 4 to 11 and just hit the tab button, just so we can indent everything a little bit so we can see where it is that the tags are actually starting to open and close a little bit more. So if I go over to line 4 and I click this little caret there, it's going to now collapse those two head tags together. So when we're working in HTML, most tags have an opening and a closing, and the things that are between those tags is what it is that is going to actually either be influenced by or inherit things from whatever it is that the other tags that are wrapping it. So if I expand this head tag, we can see everything that's in between that head tag again. And if I expand this body tag, we can see everything that's in this body tag. We're going through each part of it so y'all can kind of see what is that's going on, because this is going to be super important when we start adding our own HTML to this and once we actually start styling it as well. So the key things to remember when we're working with our HTML is that, oh, a little menu bar just popped up at the bottom there. The key things to remember when we're working in our HTML file is there's two key sections where everything is pretty much going to be grouped. So we have our head tag and then we have our body tag. So each time we see like these carets here, these are called tags. So you can imagine kind of like if this was like a tag that you like pinned onto something, as you add text into these, they kind of look like that, like some type of actual tag. So anytime you have like this opening and closing with some specific type of text in between it, that's specifying the tag that it is that we're using. So this head tag is kind of telling the HTML everything it should know. So again, I know we're doing development and coding and so on and so forth, but sometimes it helps to make these things a little bit more digestible with some analogies. So if we just think about this, it's gonna get the annotation tool. So we think about this in this way where our head, our brain, keeps track of everything that is that we know. And the body tag is what actually then shows up in the browser itself. So in the head tag, so if I just make a little person here smiling, in the head tag, we're telling the HTML file everything that it should know about. Just gonna clear the screen a little bit. And if I expand that, we see here that we have these meta tags, which are important for any metadata that's inside that HTML file. And this usually you'll leave as is defaulted to. This is specifying the character set, and this is specifying the view, the dimensions of the actual page that you're going to be working in. So you see I just put a little space there. The things that we're actually going to be working with as far as our head tag is concerned is our link tag and our title so far. We'll come back and talk about other things that we can put in here at a later time, but just giving you a little bit of a tour of how everything is set up as well, just to make more sense as to everything else that we're going to do. So here, this title tag is telling us what the title of the document actually is. Do you mind sharing how to refresh the HTML output because it's not working for you? So what I did for that is if I just pull over the side here. So by default, folks probably saw the screen look a little bit like this. So what I did is I went over to this open a new tab button, and then I click that, and it just opens up again what it is that we're working on and what we're developing in the browser. Again, I just did that just so we have a little bit more visual space. If you are working on a larger screen and you don't mind having the result of the what we're developing in the browser on the side there, then what you can actually do is just click the play button. And every time you click the play button, it's going to act as a refresh and it's going to reflect what it is that we've written so far. So hopefully that kind of helps folks a little bit. Okay, but it didn't say hello world for me. That's interesting. Sorry to hear that, Betty. In your body tag, check and see if there's any text in there. And if not, we're as I'm giving y'all a tour through the HTML file, we're gonna get to the body tag. So hopefully it'll give some reassurance of getting some stuff showing up in there, Betty. So hold on, have faith that it'll come together. So hopefully that also recapped to let folks know how it is that I got this open in the side there. So what I'm going to do now is just move this bar here to the side just so y'all can see as much of the code as possible. And that's the main reason why I tried to separate a little bit of the things that we're working with here. So this title tag we see has Replit, which is the site that we're currently on. So if I were to change this and put a little smiley face, and then if I go over to this browser here and refresh, we'll see if you can see the actual browser tab has a little smiley face on it now. So if you're working within the Replit, you're not going to notice this change, and that's okay. This is if you actually have this HTML file open in the browser, and this is what's actually going to develop into our site and our app that we're making today. But just showing y'all what it is that the title tag is responsible for. So for example, we could in here say the assignment game with a smiley face. And if I come here to the browser and I refresh, we see that that tab is changing. So just to recap there again, you're only going to really be seeing this reflecting if you actually have this app that we're making open in another tab. If it's still inside of here, you're not going to see that change happening, but that's okay. This isn't too pertinent to actually getting everything to work. I'm just trying to make sure that folks are as aware as possible of what it is that we're working with here. So that's what that title tag is responsible for. So then we have a link tag. So this link tag is responsible for linking anything that our HTML file should know about. So in here, this tag actually is using self-closing syntax. So we see how with the title tag, it has an opening and a closing to it, where our closing tags have that little / after the caret to encompass what text they're wrapping. Our link tag here has the ability to be self-closing. So we don't have to write link again with the closing tag. So something else to be aware of here is each one of these, we see some light blue text and then some orange text next to it as well. So these are called properties. So these are the properties of this link tag. So I'm just going to space them out a little bit so it's a little bit more visual, especially because the text sometimes wraps to the next line and sometimes things look a little bit offset. So to help with some of that, y'all will see that with these properties, sometimes I'll just hit enter on them and then move them over to the next line. So I just hit enter on that one, hit enter on this one, hit enter on that one. And then if you want to, you can hit enter here on this as well, and then line it up so that this link tag here has its closing on it. Awesome. Love to see it. I see folks helping each other in the chat as well. Cool. So this is so that things are just a little bit easier to read, because sometimes the properties that we're passing things aren't short text like this. So you're going to see me spacing this out like this when we create other properties on other tags. So if we see our link tag, we have an href here, and this is pretty much telling us specifically what file it is that we're linking. If I open up if I click this little sheet of paper again and open up where all of our files are so far, we'll see that we have an index.html file. I'm just going to move that over a little bit. Index.html file, a JavaScript file, and then a CSS file. So this href is asking for the source of the link to whatever it is that we're trying to link to our HTML. So that href is telling our HTML, go look for this file in the same file scope. So some folks that might have had a little bit more experience with this already might have seen that you can do like a // and this is just emphasizing that it's in the same folder. So either or is okay, but this is how this came configured. So I'm just going to leave it as such for now as well. This rel property here is just asking what the relevance of this link is, and it's a style sheet that we're linking into here. And then the type is just specifying that it's a text doc and it's CSS in particular. So these are just the properties of the thing that is that we're linking into here. So again, this is just a little bit of configuration just to make sense as to what it is that's going on here in this doc. Because from here, we know that we have our CSS sheet linked to our HTML. So we don't really have to worry too much about any other configuration. So we can just collapse that head tag for now. Sometimes it just looks like a whole bunch of stuff happening here. And it just helps a little bit to just focus on particular sections at particular times. So knowing that this style sheet is linked, something that we can actually do in here is change our background color, which is something that's always like super reassuring, especially getting started, so that you can actually see that you're doing something, especially sometimes if this text is a little bit difficult to see. So if I go into here and I actually just go over to the body in particular, so I'm going to specifically say body. I'm going to open up some curly brackets here and then hit space between those curly brackets. And if I say background like that, and I just hit tab just so it completed a little quickly, but you can type it out yourself as well. And something I usually say with CSS is start off with drastic changes, something that you can see immediately, because CSS is a whole talent in of itself to learn. And folks who have been working with it can concur with the sentiment of sometimes you're trying to make the CSS align in a particular way or do a particular thing, and it's not doing that. So sometimes you want to do something that you can notice immediately just so you know if your CSS is actually registering or not. So I'm going to make our background color red for starters, just so we can immediately see it. So again, if you're working in here, you can click the play button and that should actually show you that change. And if not, and you have it open in the tab here like I do, I'm just going to refresh and look at that. Super vibrant. So we know that this is actually changing the background. I'm going to pick something maybe a little bit more gentle. This was a random color that I came across. Biscay, I believe is how it's pronounced. So if I click on that and then I go over to the browser and refresh, we see it's this like nice beige color. So cool. So are we asking about how it is that we changed the background color? So just to recap that, it's pronounced bisque. I appreciate that. Bisque is how I think it's pronounced. Awesome. I appreciate that, folks. I saw it and I'm just like, I don't even know how to pronounce this color here. But like folks who are into design as well know that there's all types of colors with all types of like amazing like spelling and like intricacies and stuff like that. I just came across it. I was just like, oh, let me pick a random color. And I was like, Biscay. But now I know it's pronounced bisque. So the way that I refresh, again, if you're working in the Replit site directly, you're just going to click the play button and then you should see that change happen immediately. What I did is I clicked this little square with the arrow in it pointing to the upper right-hand direction to open it in a separate tab. And now every time I'm in here, this is actually now like in the browser. So what I'm doing is just refreshing the page and then the change shows up there. So just a reminder again, folks, that this is going to be recorded. So if there's any time where things might be moving at a little bit of a quick pace, no worries there, because once you get the recording, you can always loop it back as well. Just trying to keep the pace a little bit because I know we have a mission in mind today. We want to see that game board by the time it is that we're wrapping up. But hopefully everyone's able to change their background color. Can folks share in the chat what it is that you chose for your background color? Because again, it's really up to you on what it is that you want to make your background color. Just kind of curious. We got aqua, navy. Okay, Ryan went with Biscay, which you know is Biscay. General that. Awesome, cool. So again, like I said, you're gonna kind of see that I'm using particular dimensions, particular numbers for stuff. But just know that again, like everyone's browser might be a little bit different. So feel free to customize this and pick any color it is that you want so that there's a little bit more personal. You know, it feels good when you're making something that you're actually connected to. So just know it doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but this is just me guiding y'all to it. So feel free to customize more. Quite frankly, honestly, y'all's might look more better styled than mine once you like actually like get more time to like work on it until next week's event as well. And I really want y'all to have some fun with it. So feel free to customize it to the degree that makes you feel comfortable. So just that reminder there that this is being recorded, so you can always loop it back from there. Correct. So again, I'm just gonna recap a little bit. So in our HTML file, if I click over here, we have our link tag, which is what's actually linking this CSS sheet. And then I just went over to that tab. And again, if folks are picking the files one at a time on the side, if you click the sheet of paper, you can just shift between the index HTML, the JavaScript, and the CSS, and so on and so forth. And I just went to the CSS file. And then I wrote the word body, opened up some curlies, wrote background colon space, and then I just wrote Biscay. Is what I'm gonna roll with for the night, and then put a semicolon after. And then you can either hit the play button, or if you have it open a separate tab, you can refresh. So what it is that it is called when we're specifying what in the HTML we're interacting with specifically, those are called CSS selectors. So we're selecting particular tags in our HTML file, and that is what is actually going to then be styled. So with that being said, where is this body that it is that we just changed the background color of? And if we go back to our HTML file, we'll see that, again, our head tag is responsible for what it is that we need to know, what the HTML file needs to know. Our body tag is more so what it is that we're showing, like what it is that is able to be seen in the browser. So if I expand this body tag, we see that's where this hello world text is coming from. We also see the script tag here. And then we also see a little bit of some default stuff that REPL, the IT put in here. We can feel free to just clear this out. And this is just going to just simplify what it is that you're seeing a little bit. That's just stuff that the site put in for their own personal customization, but you don't need that in there. So we're just gonna need a script file in here, which again, I know some folks are just like, Sam, why isn't it in the head tag? We'll come back to it. I just want to keep stuff a little bit streamlined. But for now, you can just move your script tag to the bottom by hitting enter a couple times. And then if you're on Mac, you can use the Option key and the up and down arrow to move some of these lines. And if you're on Windows, you should be able to use the Alt key and move things up and down as well, if you kind of saw what I was doing there. So I always make the joke, I'm not a wizard yet. These are just some shortcuts that are in different text editors, and they help you move stuff a little bit quickly here. So our body tag is what actually is going to be seen in the browser. So we see that our head tag had a bunch of stuff in it, but we don't see literally anything that says metadata on here, anything that says title on here, and so on and so forth. This is a little bit more informational stuff. This is more configuration-based stuff. The stuff we're actually going to be working with is going to be between our body tags. So currently we just have hello world written here in plain text. Though this makes something show up in the browser, it's more ideal to actually use HTML tags or HTML elements to specify the text on the page, because again, we're going to start to realize when we want to go and customize stuff or style stuff, it's going to be difficult to select it if there's no tag in relation to it. So just to recap a little bit, remember the way we changed our background was by selecting our body tag and changing the background of it, because the body tag encompasses everything it is that we're seeing in the browser, all inclusive. So if I go back to our HTML file here, we see we have hello world, but if I wanted to style this, it'd be a little bit difficult to do that. So what I'm gonna actually do is create a tag, an HTML tag, HTML element. A classic one of our headers, which is anything that you use to kind of like head off or start off a section. is shorthanded with the letter H, which is short for header. And we see that each one of these numbers coming after that specify a different size of the text. Because remember, hypertext markup language is marking up the text so that it changes the styling and the presentation and the properties of that text. So it's not just plain text on the page. So let's see what happens if I do H1. And then if I do a closing caret here, we notice that it automatically gives us a nice opening and closing tag. And what I can do is just take this text here and copy it, or you can type it again yourself as well, paste it. And now again, if you're working here, you can click the play button, or if you're working in the browser, you can click the refresh button. And look at that. See how it's the same text, but it was marked up by the powers of the H1 tag, so to speak, so that it is now changing its size and any other properties of what it means to be an H1 element there. How are we doing, folks? Can I get some thumbs up or any emoji of your choice in the chat? How we keeping up so far, folks? Awesome, awesome, awesome. Cool. Look at y'all being developers. Look at y'all putting stuff in the browser. I'm so proud of y'all. Give yourselves a round of applause. Awesome. Cool. It's gonna, everything it is that we're doing is just gonna keep stacking from here, and pun intended again, because, like, you know, developer joke there, stack the data structure, you know, but everything is stacking points. So if you got the joke, if not, it's okay. So we see here that it's a little bit more helpful to be working with tags. Okay, I see in the chat there. Awesome. See folks helping each other on the chat. Awesome. Cool. See, when we're working with tags, before we even choose how it is that we're going to style something, it already has some type of styling that comes with it a little bit just by the tag that is wrapped in it. So if I go ahead and make another tag, if I make an H2 tag here, and then I do a little closing caret and hit space, and then if I do hello, if I can spell, I was make the joke, because I could code, but my spelling though, we don't have to talk about it. So if I do hello world, team dyslexia, y'all know what I'm talking about. And then if I again hit the play button, or if I refresh, we got another tag here, and it's a little bit smaller. So this is something that I always say is a little humorous and a little counterintuitive, that the smaller number is the bigger text. Yeah. But the more y'all do this, the more that you get comfortable with these fundamentals about what it is when you're working in HTML. That's what spell check is for. I appreciate it, for sure. This is why we have these resources to help us with our spelling and anything else as well. Cool. So following that logic, what I'm just going to do here is just delete the hello world that was in plain text. And we're just going to work with our actual text that's wrapped with our HTML tags, our actual text that's wrapped with HTML elements. Taking a sip because I know I've been talking a lot. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Cool. So let's keep rolling, folks. I think I'm just rolling through some of my notes here. I already gave y'all a reminder as far as that this is going to be recorded. We got the part 2 next week. We'll wrap up the game from there. And especially as we get into our CSS, I just want to remind folks that you're going to see me working in pixels and percentages. And again, there's a bunch of other different options that you have, but this is just to make it a little bit more digestible, a little bit more streamlined here. So if I catch back up, so we got 2 titles here. If I go and adjust things a little bit now here, so we know that our body tag is has a background that has been changed. So if we go back to our style.css file, what I'm also going to do here is I'm just going to hit enter in front of background and hit enter in front of that other curly there, because we're going to add some other key value pairs here to this body tag. So if I hit enter after this body tag, what I'm actually going to do is something that's going to help just center everything we're going to be working on today a little bit. So this is a CSS, probably called text align. And if you can type it yourself as I'm writing, or you can hit tab and like use something like the autofill that's coming up. I'm just going to do center on that. And if we now hit play or refresh the page, whichever way it is that you're following along, you're going to see that everything just moved over to the center a little bit, which is super awesome. I see that the Zoom screen is in the way a little bit. So what I'm actually going to do is try to move it to the next screen here a little bit, just so it's out of the way. Cool. And look at that. Now we got everything centered a little bit. So again, just that reminder, the way this trichotomy comes together, the way these three files come together to create this experience, our HTML, is exactly what you see by default. We're using some tags here so that we can specify the default styling that we want in tandem with the power of the tag that's wrapping the text. Then here in our style sheet, we can actually start to adjust the presentation of what it is that's happening here. So another analogy I usually make here is we have our index.html file, our CSS file, and our JavaScript file. And I always say it's like we're putting on a show. And this makes sense when we talk about event handling when we wrap everything up today as well. But our index.html is like the stage. What is it that the people see as soon as the page loads, as soon as someone enters the theater? Our style sheet is like our design team. Like we have like who's like doing the makeup for folks like in the show, like who's like decorating the things that are actually on stage so that it's not just a chair there. Maybe it's a chair with like a drape over it that makes it have a particular color or something like that. And in our script, I always make the joke analogy of like, this is what it is that the actors read in the show. This is how we make our actual application more interactive. So, and yes, Replit does have a autosave, and I appreciate that folks like the analogy there because we're going to see how this continues to stack upon one another. When the stage, like the curtains open, so to speak, the page loaded, we just saw text on the page. But if we actually want to choose where we position the text, i.e. if we just open the stage and there's just a chair there, but we say, okay, I actually want the chair in the middle of the page, we have to talk to our style sheet. Our style sheet is who's responsible for how everything is going to be presented on the stage. So you can imagine in my head, I'm imagining like the SpongeBob episode with SpongeBob and Squidward. They're like popping out on stage over and over again and stuff like that. But however it is, once the curtains open, what you see. So we got our text aligned centered now, which is super awesome. And once we actually start talking about functionality is when we're going to be tagging into our script file. So let's keep stacking upon everything. So we got a background color, which is awesome. We got our text align center, which is great because anyone who's worked with CSS before knows that you can try text align center, justify center, and all different things. And sometimes it just doesn't go to the middle. So I'm glad that this like did what it is that we asked for. Cool. So you can feel free to space this out a little bit more too if it helps a little bit more visually that this here is responsible for the background. This here is responsible for aligning our text center. So the next thing it is that we're going to do is actually start to style some of the text in here. So what we can actually do, if we go back to our index.html file, we know that we have these this H1 and this H2 here. If I go over to our CSS sheet here, what I can actually do is use our selector to select our H1 by writing H1, hitting space, and then what I can actually do is change the color of the text. If I write background, like we did before, and I change this to, again, like I said, when you're working in CSS, it's always great to just make an extreme change just so you can see it immediately. So I'm gonna put red as the background. If I hit play or refresh the page, look at that. A lot of times folks think that background on text is going to actually change the color of the text. In order to change the color of the text, we actually need to use a property called color. We see the background literally change what was behind the text itself. So I'm going to change this from background to color. And now if we hit play or hit refresh, we start to see that the actual text changed colors. So feel free to have some fun with this. Pick any color it is that resonates with you. I'm probably just going to go with maybe like a sky blue or something. And then refresh and look at that. Awesome. Cool. Now, if I want to style this H2 tag, I can do H2, open up some curlies, hit enter. And then if I want to change the background color on that, we can maybe make this like, I don't know, like magenta or something. because that's just a color that just makes me smile because it just has such like an eloquent name, magenta. So if we click play or refresh the page, we'll see that that text changed as well. So again, like I said, I'm just picking any colors, but feel free to customize this, make it personal. And especially once y'all get the recording, start to actually play with the CSS a little bit more and customize things a little bit more dynamically. So with that being said, I feel like y'all have a lot of ground covered so far. Look at y'all putting text on a web page, changing the color of it, and this is just going to keep stacking upon on a list so we can finally actually get that game board showing up shortly, quicker than you even think. There's a bunch of different colors, and again, you can play with like hexadecimal code. I think I saw someone drop the resource for different CSS like customizations as well. So as you continue to look this stuff up, you'll start to see how to get particular colors, but all I'm really doing is just typing in names. So again, if you're thinking of a color, just type it. Like if I did brown, it shows up. And then if I refresh the page, it now reflects as such as well. So there's a bunch of different colors that you can kind of just type and see what shows up. Or you can also click on the actual color square that shows up, and then you can play with this yourself and customize it a little bit so that things can actually show up exactly as what you want. Or you can change what's called like the RGB or the hex code to get a very, very intricate and specific color. So this is definitely something I would recommend for y'all to play with until next week's event as you're customizing your game board even more. So now we see that it changed to a hexadecimal code, which is a whole concept in of itself, but just know that this is like a way to get more precise color distribution. So I'm just gonna switch this back to magenta for now. Magenta. Notice that I didn't put the hashtag because hashtag is going to make a hexadecimal code for that specific numerological depiction of what color you want to choose. So I'm going to write magenta. Cool. Bring it back again. Awesome. Cool. So you can style specific elements. And then I'm going to roll into something else that you can do as well to get a little bit more precise with your styling. What I'm going to do now in our HTML files, I'm going to create what's called a div. So a div is another type of tag, and it's a little shorthand for just a divider, like something that you want to section off. So if we have this div here and I refresh the page or click the play button, we're going to see absolutely nothing. Why? Because unlike text elements that obviously need some text between them, our div tag actually doesn't really show up unless you put something between it. So if I put a smiley face and then click play or refresh the page, going once, twice, thrice, where are you, div? Why are you not showing up, buddy? Let me check this part here. If I bring this over here and then click the play button. Interesting. I wonder, can folks drop something in? Okay, cool. Just making sure my internet didn't freeze or something. Because I see here it looks like the page is loading a little bit, which is interesting. New tags, it won't work. Works for me. Yeah, I'm just trying to build up to it a little bit. Let me try to refresh the page one more time. Okay, let me try to actually put something in between there or style the div so we can actually see things a little bit more detailed. So if I go over to my style sheet, what I can actually do here is if I say div, open up some curlies, and then do a color, colon, and then again, just something more elaborate so that we can see it immediately. And now if I refresh the page, we don't see our div showing up. What's going on here? Let me refresh this page itself real quick. Changes may not be saved. That's okay. Let me try to reload the page. Looks like my page might be lagging a little bit. Sorry about that, folks. Cool. Technology, you know, we do the best that we can, but sometimes stuff is gonna lag. Let me try to refresh again now. Cool, we see those things showing up. I'm just gonna redistribute everything again. So I'm just gonna close this file there on the side and then move this to the side again. Cool, we don't see the styling there because like it said, it told me it wasn't going to save it because it seemed like things were lagging a little bit. And then if I do background and then red, and then if I go here and refresh, Did I put a div tag actually in the HTML? Did it remember that? Okay, it didn't remember the div tag when I had to refresh the page. So I'm just going to put the div tag in there again. And now I'm going to just drag each of these files up here as well, just so I don't have to keep going to the sidebar there to get the files. Come on. There we go. Cool. Everything is just a little bit laggy. Close the files there. Cool. And let's try it again. Drum roll. What's going on, Div? Interesting. The play button. The div background's not showing up. Interesting. Super interesting. Well, the direction we're going to go in is a little bit more dynamic, but I just want to build off of the actual styling of that div tag. Let me try to put a little smiley face in there. I think I know exactly what it is. It just dawned upon me. There we go. Yep, because we don't have anything between the tags. So trying to very much piecemeal it. And then I remembered, I'm just like, Sam, the tag doesn't have any depth to it. So of course we're not going to see anything in there, as I'm jogging my memory here. So once I put the smiley face, we saw that this showed up. So if I take that smiley face out again, and we actually want that div to show up more in detail, what we're actually going to need to do is give it some type of height. So if we give it a height, like I said, whenever you're doing your CSS, you always want to just do something major that you know you're going to see for sure. So I'm just going to give it a height of 1,000 pixels so that we can't miss it. And if I refresh the page, there we go. So this is what it is that's actually going there. Looks like Div has beef with you, Sam. I know. and that's how it goes. Anyone, like I said, anyone who's worked with CSS knows that it either does exactly what you're asking for, or it does the exact opposite of what you're asking for. So something to notice is, again, the way things are showing up in this top to bottom fashion here, excuse me, is the default way, or the static way, as you might hear sometimes, that our HTML files actually set up. We have the H1 showing up first, our H2 showing up after that, and then we have a div tag after that. So they're showing up in that order. And because I went a little over the top and put 1,000 pixels, we can definitely see that this div exists now. So if I refresh, we see now 100 pixels. It's a little bit more narrowed out, which is super awesome. How are we doing so far, folks? Awesome. So we got that justified, got our border style, border radius, looking good. I think we're gonna wanna put some flex wrap soon as well. Just making sure we're keeping pace with everything in line. Cool, looking good, looking good. All right, so what I'm gonna do is create another div. So I'm going to make another div here. And just so we can tell the difference between them, one of them I'm going to make a smiley face with 1 parenthesis, and the other one I'm going to make a smiley face with 2 parentheses because they're very happy. So if I now go back and press the play button, or if I refresh the page, we're going to see that both of these are showing up red. So if we're working towards this game board that we're designing here, we know that even though it's convenient to style one same tag in a particular way, what happens if you actually want things of different colors? So this is where we're going to want unique identifiers for each one of our tags, or what's also known as IDs, so that we can actually identify stuff in their own unique way. So instead of mass styling each of our divs, I'm going to add a property, if y'all remember from before, called an ID. Which is a unique identifier. And in here, I'm going to specifically say, this is the one that I want red. So for example, we can probably name this like color red or something, color-red here. So we have a unique identifier for this. And then what I'm gonna do, like y'all saw me do earlier, I'm just gonna start spacing this out a little bit. I'm just gonna hit enter on these div tags, and I'm gonna hit enter on this property as well, just so that we can get some more space, because we'll eventually start adding more properties to each one of these tags. So if we click in here, we still are going to see the exact same thing happening. We haven't actually utilized the fact that we now put a unique identifier on this div to distinguish it from the next div, the latter div. So if I go over to our style sheet now, One reminder that I always give folks when it comes to using our CSS selectors is once you start working with IDs and classes, sometimes it's hard to remember which one is. So a nice mnemonic or like reminder that I kind of created, and I usually share this with students as well until like things start to click a little bit more and ring a bell. We have IDs and then we have classes that we'll be using a class in a little bit as well. But IDs use the hashtag symbol. And classes use the dot symbol. So if you're kind of asking yourself, how am I going to remember this? Something that I usually tell students, because I'm big on when it comes to visual learning as well, is remember that an ID starts with the letter I and uses a hashtag. If you're ever forgetting that, just write a capital letter I, and then we start to kind of realize you can turn that into a hashtag. So it's a nice kind of quick reminder there. And you're going to see me use this in a little bit. And then classes starts with a C. And our C actually wraps that dot. So it's just a reminder that if you're working with a class, use a dot. If you're working with an ID, use a hashtag for your CSS selectors. Let's see this in action a little bit. So in our index.html, we just created an ID here, an ID property. So this is associated with the color red. So I'm just going to copy that, or you can write it yourself, but y'all see how my spelling is going so far. So if I go over to the CSS file, what I'm going to do is start to create another set of styling that we're going to be utilizing. And like I said, IDs, I turns into a hashtag. So we're going to use hashtag, and then I'm just going to drop color red here. And then I'm going to do some opening curlies there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to only change the background color of the red one to red. And vice versa, if I go back to the HTML, and for the second div, if I give it an ID, and I change that to green, let's say, I think it's, yeah, I'll do red, green, we'll just go on that word, green, or color dash green, quotes, bam. And if I just space this out again as well. So again, like I said, we have our opening and closing tags. So this is where the tag opens and closes. Now, if I go to that style sheet and I make another hashtag, and then I call it color green. And remember, this is less about the fact that I chose this that's causing the color, and more about what we specify for the background. If we do background and then we do green here, if I click the play button or if I refresh the page, we should be able to see, it looks like it's a little bit lagged. There we go. Now look at that. Our divs are actually two separate colors. So just a reminder for folks that we're just trying to keep pace with creating the game board, and also this is going to be recorded. So no worries. You're going to get an email with a link with everything it is that we're doing today so that you can catch up speed. And then again, our friendly reminder that we have a part 2 next week where we're going to be continuing off of what it is that we're developing today so far. So something I want to highlight as well as we're here is CSS stands for cascading style sheets. Cascading means it's working from top to bottom. If you can imagine like cascading waterfalls, you know, even though all of our divs are technically still being styled red, because the stuff at the bottom precedes it and overrides that, we see that that second div actually shows up as green. If I comment this out with the command button and the / key, and then we go here and I click refresh, look at that. All of the divs are still being set to red. But we don't want that. We want each div to have its own unique color, because this is how we're going to start to turn these into the pieces of the game board. So again, this is where we start to see how we use CSS to create really nice aesthetics of stuff. Because I know currently we only really have just some text and a couple of rectangles on the page. We're going to see this continue to transform. So I'm just going to tag in this again with the command button and the / key. This is a quick way to comment stuff in and out. Comments is a way that you can kind of like tag out some code for some time without deleting it, just so that the compiler isn't actually reading it, so that it doesn't actually influence what it is that you're doing here. So now that we know that we actually want each one of these divs to have their own background color, we're just going to get rid of this background color. And maybe we know all the game pieces are going to be the same height. So what it is that we're going to do is just leave them all at the same height. And if I refresh now, we start to see that each of these are coming together a little bit. If I go over to our HTML file now, I can also start to get rid of these smiley faces, because we know that we're actually creating some height on these divs within that CSS file. So if I go here, I'm going to take out these smiley faces. And now what I'm going to do is make the other two colors of the board game. So it actually starts off with green, and then, well, we see it, you can customize it any color that you want, like I said. So since we already have red as the first color, we'll just roll with it as such as well. If I refresh, we see that the smiley faces are out, but we still have our divs here, these divider sections, and we're just changing the properties of them with CSS. We're changing how it looks, if you remember that analogy of the show that we're putting on. So if we create two more divs, if I go here and I create a div, and I create another div, and then close that, and then I give each one of these unique identifiers. So if I say ID, and we know that this one we want to be, let's just say, color blue, color dash blue. And then the next one we want to be an ID, unique identifier of color dash yellow. I think is the last one that we got missing there. And then again, I'm just gonna space this out because again, we're gonna be adding more properties soon, just so it's a little bit easier to keep track of which one is corresponding with which. So in here, this is the opening and closing for the color blue. This is the opening and closing for the color red. This is the opening and closing for the color yellow. If we refresh, we won't see anything just yet, because remember, those other two divs have not yet been styled. So if I go to the style.css sheet, and then I add another ID selector here in our CSS. So if I say, interesting, the color green function up there. There it goes, now it showed up. So if I do hashtag, because remember these are IDs, the I turns into a hashtag. So if I say color dash blue, I think we had after that. And then just a reminder again that the names aren't what's actually giving them the color, because if I said background on here and I made this black and then refreshed, we actually see that that's actually the color that's showing up. So just a reminder that it's not the name that actually gives it the color, it's the background color specifically that gives it the color. So specifically, if we want this to be blue, we want it to be blue, but the name is just something convenient for us to uniquely identify it when we're looking at our HTML or when we're looking at our CSS. So if I refresh here, now we see we got red, blue, and red, green, and blue. Now we just need a unique identifier for our yellow game piece. So if I do color dash yellow, some curlies, and then do background, and then colon, and then yellow. Again, this looks like first gen Pokemon, red, blue, green, and then yellow version. Bada bang. We got those different colors going on. So each of these we're going to start to style in their own ways and dimensions so that we can actually start to adjust how it is that they're showing up. How are we doing so far, folks? Just trying to keep the pace as well. And just a reminder that this is being recorded so we can always loop it back. See some thumbs up in the chat. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So now we're gonna start. Look at what y'all like. Let's take a quick second and just like give yourself a round of applause. You're making stuff happen on the road, and it's okay whatever pace it is that you're working at, because this is going to be this is being recorded, so you can always reference it and come back to it. But whatever you're able to accomplish today, you should definitely be proud of yourself for it. So now that the wheels are kind of turning a little bit more, y'all are kind of seeing what's going on here. We can start to change these hello worlds into something a little bit more meaningful. For example, we can change this to say maybe like Flatiron Simon game. A little forward slashes there, Flatiron. And then here we can maybe do something like score, colon, 0, not -0, that doesn't make this. And now if we click the play button or refresh the page, we start to see how stuff is slowly coming a little bit together in a more meaningful way. So we are gonna adjust our font now What we can see is if we go to our style sheet, we know that our H1 here is what's corresponding with this color here. And what I can actually also do is add what is called a font family. And if I click tab on that, it'll just autofill it for me. And you can choose any font family that exists. I forget which one I went with before. I think I did Franklin. I don't know. I was just typing whichever one shows up. Oh, font family. And then in quotes, Franklin. Last time it did autofill for me. So I'm just going to copy and paste this just because, I don't want to misspell it. And then I'll drop it in the chat as well in case folks everyone, just for easier view. Again, you can play with all different types of font families. And again, feel free to take that time to do that between now and next week's follow-up part 2. But if we refresh, we see that the page changed a little bit. Our text actually changed a little bit. So for ease of simplicity, I'm just going to take this exact same font family and I'm going to change our H2 as well so that that one also has the same font. So we don't have this random Times New Roman font. Feel free to play with a bunch of different font families between now and next week. You're going to see there's a bunch of different stuff out there that you can use to just like really like depict the text exactly how it is that you want. And again, that reminder, this is what CSS is all about. We're styling our app. We're decorating the stage of the show. So I'm just going to put these as the font families that we're working with. But again, like I said, take your time to customize it and find some fonts that are really meaningful to you that you enjoy as well. So we got our font change. We got our score here. We can come back and like adjust like the score and whatnot. I just want to start resizing these divs a little bit more as well, just so that things can start to get a little bit positioned so we can start to see where everything is. So we know at some point we want to maybe contain everything else in its own div itself. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to, should we start? Yeah, let's make the game board. So we have all 4 of these divs. What I'm going to actually do is wrap them in another div, and that's what's going to contain each one of these pieces, and we're going to start to see all of the pieces continue to come together. So if I make another div now, and if I just highlight, or what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to take this closing tag here, and I'm just going to use Command X, or you can just delete it yourself and then retype it. And then I'm just going to go to the bottom of the last div and then paste that or make another closing div. So all of this is going to divide or contain. This is where sometimes you'll hear the verbiage containers in certain development design spaces. I'm going to make another div to contain all 4 of these pieces. So I'm going to scroll up to where our divs that are actually keeping track of the color is. I'm just going to hold the shift key and click just so I can highlight everything and then hit tab, just so we can see a little bit more visually that these are each the divs for the game pieces. And now we're going to give this div a unique identifier, an ID, and we're going to call it game board. Enter in here. And if I do ID equals, and then some quotes, not ID again, I forgot I had it on copy and paste. I'm going to call this game dash board. And again, remember, these unique identifiers are just for us as developers, because yes, you're a developer today, and onward as well as you continue to work on this game. It's just easy for us as developers to uniquely identify each one of these pieces as they come together. So we're just looking for something to contain the entire game board itself. So from here, what we're going to do is add some styling to that div itself. So we know so far, each of our divs are all being set to a height of 100 pixels. And we're about to create another selector here for that ID that we just added to the div that's wrapping the other ones. And we called it what? Game dash board. So if I now have this in curlies and then space that out, and then give it a new background color. So if I do background colon, and then what's a color we actually didn't use? I'm just gonna use magenta again, magenta. And then if I hit the play button or if I refresh the page, what are we gonna see? It looks like nothing is showing up at the moment. So if I actually maybe change the height of this to, let's say 1,000 pixels, so we can maybe get a little bit more reassurance of what it is that's going on here. What's actually happening, folks, this game board div is behind everything else. So remember, each of our divs are being styled to 100 pixels. So our game board was there the entire time, but because it's styled to 100 pixels, it's behind everything and we can't see it. So here's where, even though it is convenient and comfortable to style a bunch of elements in the same way, you're going to start to realize that if you have things that are similar, you probably want to group them together in the same styling group, or what usually is used as classes. So you can kind of imagine, like, if we're in school, everyone's in a different class. Maybe it is you're taking JavaScript, or maybe you're taking React. We're all in different classes and you're grouped in that way because you're doing something similar. So here's where classes start to show up. So we start to realize it was convenient at first to style each one of our divs like using the same styling, but we're gonna actually want each of these things to be a little bit more unique. So I'm just gonna change the background of this to black, because that's what we actually see that the game board beneath the pieces actually starts to be. And then what I'm going to do is get rid of this here. On that, and bear with me, folks, we're trying to do as much as possible before we wrap up. And then again, we can wrap back on the recording side as well. So if I hit play or hit the refresh button, we see that now this is overcasting everything. So what we're gonna want to start to do as well is position this in a particular way so that it's not overcasting all of our other pieces. So here's where we would tag into our position properties here. So the position that we're actually going to be using is going to be relative, so that we can actually start to customize more relatively where we're going to place everything else with respect to this piece as well. So we see that this is still covering all the other pieces, but it now has been adjusted a little bit. So we're going to be able to customize a little bit more where it is that everything is showing up. So what I'm going to do is just maybe bring this down to like 500 pixels, and then hit the play button or refresh. And we see that it's collapsing down a little bit more. And now if we actually want this to start rounding out a bit, and I don't know if anyone can see, I think maybe it's just me that can see, but like you can kind of see like the colors a little bit behind it. If we want to start rounding this out a little bit now, we can actually use another property called border radius, so that we can actually start to round out some of the edges of this div, because we see by default it's going to be a rectangle, or it's going to be some type of square or something in that family of that quadrilateral, so to speak. Sorry to be like geometry terms. So what we're going to do with our border radius, we can either work in pixels. So for example, if I do 100 pixels, let's see how this starts to change stuff a little bit. I refresh, we see that that rounded off all the edges 100 pixels. So again, like I said at the beginning, you can adjust your numbers because based upon how you want to size stuff, but just so you kind of see what attributes it is that you should be using to get started, and then keep customizing this until next week's part 2. So we can use pixels for rounding things out, or what we can actually also do is use percentages. Like I told you at the beginning, the main thing I'm going to be using is pixels and percentages, just because I feel like that's something we can easily conceptualize. So instead of working on like the depth of how many pixels we're edging off our border radius, if we use percentages, we're just saying we want 100% of the edges gone. What happens if you take a square and you remove all of the edges? It becomes, okay, drum roll at the page is loading. Thank you. A circle. And we see that we're kind of getting that shape showing up now as well. So what I'm going to do really quickly is just, let me just see where our div is opening and closing to make sure everything is grouped properly there. Cool. So I'm going to do is just comment out this div really quickly for the game board, just so I can make sure our pieces are still there. Yeah, because I'm noticing our other pieces disappeared now. So if I go to our style sheet, let me see what's going on here. Why are other pieces not showing up? So they have their background colors there. Looking good. Super interesting. It's almost like maybe one of them is not picking up on the other. And I commented this one out. We have our body tag going. You remove the div, depth, and the text. I appreciate the highlight because we got rid of teamwork makes the dream work, folks. We got rid of our div completely. I'll tell y'all, I'm team JavaScript. CSS is no joke in of itself. And you'll start to see how it is that these things come together as well. But some of these things, if we forget like how it is that they're showing up and how it is that they're being represented, then we can start to lose track of stuff like I just did, forgetting that I removed the div completely from here. So we have the game board that has a height, but now we need to give a height to our other pieces as well. So we can do something maybe like this, where we say like height, maybe 200 pixels, and then we can do width of 200 pixels. And then if I hit the play button or refresh, we should start to see the team rolling in one by one as the wheel is bada bang. And now we actually got the square showing up, which is super nice. And if we keep taking this and kind of rinse repeating, we take, I'm just copying and pasting that. So we got our height, 200 pixels. Paste that over here. Height and width, 200 pixels. Take that and paste it here. Height and width, 200 pixels. And if I refresh, look at that. We're starting to kind of like size down each one of these pieces a little bit. So if we want to start removing the edges of these so that things start to look a little bit more curved, like what our actual game pieces look like, what we can actually start to do is work with the border radius. If we take the border radius, just copied and pasted it here, and then I click the play button or I refresh, now we have this as a circle, but we know we don't quite want a circle. We kind of want like an arced piece a little bit. So instead of using the border radius property, which is going to affect all the borders of the entire shape, we actually want to just focus on a specific part that we want to round out. So instead of doing border radius altogether, what we can actually do is border radius, or is it border top? There we go. So once we start specifying which corner we want to round out, we get different options. So if I say border top, we want to do the top left if we're imagining that this is going to be the piece on the top left corner. And maybe for that one, we want to do 100% just to see how it shows up. And now if I click into here and refresh, bada bang, look at that. We're starting to kind of get these to show up and resemble as some pieces here. So if I take that and then I copy and paste it over to our green piece here, and then I refresh, look at that. But we actually don't want every single piece to have the same border radius removed. We know that this is going to be the top left piece. This is going to be the top right piece. This is going to be the bottom left piece, and this is going to be the bottom right. I mean, the bottom left piece and the bottom right piece. So we kind of want to style their border radiuses accordingly. So instead of top left, for this one, we probably want to do top right. Hit the play button or refresh, and we start to see this all coming together. Ding. Now, next up, we got our blue and yellow piece. So if we go over to our blue piece, and then we do border, and then we do dash, we want the bottom edge of that one, if it's going to be on the bottom. Well, when everything kind of wraps together, as we'll see in a little bit, this is actually going to show up on the ladder. So I've got a little bit more time. I would just let it kind of play out for the teachable moment of it. But just bear with me here. I'm going to actually round out the bottom right side on here. So I'm going to do border dash bottom and then dash right radius. And then that I'm going to do 100% on. And then on the yellow one, I'm going to do border dash bottom left radius. And I'm going to also do 100% on that. And now if we refresh, or if you click the play button, we start to kind of see how these are starting to look like pieces. Before they were literally just a bunch of like long rectangles. We eventually got them down to squares, and now we're starting to round them out a little bit. Folks who've probably been working with CSS for some time know that you can really mold these divs, and it kind of starts to feel like Play-Doh. So between now and next week, feel free to do that as well, a little bit more in detail. But what I at least want us to do is to start wrapping everything together a little bit. So what I'm actually going to do, we're going to put our flex wrap on our actual game board, which is wrapping everything. So now we'd actually want to go back to our index.html and just comment back in that game board. Comment it in, and I refresh. We start to see that we eventually want to start overlaying the pieces onto here a little bit. So we know that this game board is containing all the other pieces. So if I do the open and close there, we see that it goes down to line 43. So we have the top pieces and the bottom pieces, and we want to start to position them in a way onto the actual board there. So what we're actually going to do is use something that's called flex and wrap, so that we can kind of like start to position them in a little bit more of a row, as opposed to them just being completely vertical. Then once we get a little bit closer to there, we can start positioning it even more there. So if I go over to our style sheet and we go to our game board, and if I do display flex, this is going to make this, instead of being so vertical and completely linear and stiff, it's going to allow it to flex, to bend a little bit. And then if we do flex, and then we do flex wrap, we should start to see everything move into one row a little bit more. So these are the ways that we kind of start to play with the positioning of stuff. Mine turned into an oval. I think mine is a little bit of an oval in the background as well too. I was hoping we got through a bit more, just checking in, Corey, where we're at. Nonetheless, we do have part 2. We'll continue to stack upon this. We're just checking in, Corey.
Oh, so we are at time, but if there's something, if you're just trying to finish like rounding it out and you want to continue doing that, that's fine. Or we can pause here and then pick it up next Wednesday.
Cool. Yeah, I think because it'll take a little bit more to get things positioned into the top and bottom. We see a vote for pick it up next Wednesday, which is awesome. So again, remember that you're going to be getting a follow-up email with today's recording, so you can get up to where it is that we're at. I was trying to balance between keeping the pace but making sure y'all actually know what's going on, because I think that's really important when you're working in a development space, and like knowing what it is that is happening and why, because then you can personalize it even more. So feel free to continue to tweak around with this a little bit. You can kind of see where it is that we're going. Here's what we were working towards a little bit. So y'all can kind of see, I was like playing with that a little bit on the side earlier. And we'll continue to go so that we get this a little bit more interactive like this. But I appreciate y'all joining us today. It was a pleasure and a blast. I'm super excited to see you all next week and continue picking up from here, because now y'all got some awesome HTML skills and CSS skills, and we're gonna wrap it all together and then start getting some action and some feature going. So, yeah. Hope everyone have fun.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody. I dropped some stuff in the chat for you. It's our events page for any other events that we have coming up. Our admissions team, if you want to learn a little bit more about Flatiron School, as well as our YouTube channel, which is where we end up posting all of these events after they're done. This event should be up in the next 3 business days. There is a holiday Monday, so it may not be until Tuesday. So if you don't see it, you can email me directly. My information should be in the event description. And yeah, thank you all for coming out. And thank you, Sam, for another amazing event. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. I really had a blast.
Yes, I was talking about the recording. So the recording will be sent out to everyone. Okay, yeah, so yeah, the recording will be going out to everybody, and it'll have a link to round 2 of this presentation. And I also have it listed in the chat along with the YouTube and our website. So have an amazing night, y'all. See you next time. Bye.
See you.